All right, everyone. My name is Octo. Welcome to the second episode of MPC Overtime, and I am joined by my guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hey, everyone. I am Viper, the co-owner of the Mannfield Pro Circuit, and we had some scheduling conflicts earlier, which last week, which is why we couldn't get this episode out sooner. But we are here, and we are ready to go. So I'm excited to get this one on the road.
All right, so now we're gonna move on over to tier lists, and looking at my tier list here on screen, I think the biggest changes from last week were the Miami Thrashers moving down quite significantly, and the Boston Revolt moving up. I think Boston really impressed me these first 2 weeks because although they did lose first week to the Calgary Blaze, which I believe to be one of the top teams, if not the best team in the league at the moment, they kept it insanely close. But the game was played off stream, so you can't watch it unfortunately. But again, the game was kept really close to the Blaze, and then they go on next week to absolutely sweep the Philadelphia Vipers 3-0. Even though a lot of people had them, pretty highly ranked, Boston really did show up. I wouldn't be surprised to see Boston move up in, people's rankings and stuff to move into like the top tier teams. But yeah, I think Boston was my biggest change in my lists. The other change being the Miami Thrashers moving down. I had high hopes for the Thrashers going into these first 2 weeks, but so far they just haven't impressed me. Doc Penn, yeah, I think it's Doc Penn, Kellogg, Larry, and Dank Divine. That sounds like a pretty strong roster on paper, but in game they just weren't really impressive. They lost to the Hunters, which I believe to be a pretty mid tier team. High mid tier at best. So yeah, Thrashers just I don't know, not impressing, but I do hope to see them pop off in these coming weeks. Viper, you want to talk about your list?
Yeah. So my list is a little different, as you'll see. I do have the Blaze in top tier. In terms of top middle, well, at least top tier, I think this top tier for me is at least in order. But in terms of mid and bottom tier, I think any of those teams within that same tier could beat each other depending on the day. But the Orcas, like, I honestly think by and far they're the best team in the league right now. It's just their offense is pretty much unmatched. Like we saw in the Orcas Hunters game, like Hunters took game one, but after that it was pretty much the Orcas show. I think teams will figure this team out. Like, I don't think they're this powerhouse by any means. Like, they tend to go for a lot of risky plays. I've noticed, at least the game I watched on stream, they tended to go for a lot of risky plays. And I think as teams get better throughout the season, they can really start punishing that. The Hunters actually, I know this is going to seem like a weird comparison, but the Hunters actually remind me of the Pittsburgh Knights because the Hunters are like super good on defense. They just need to be able to start turning around those counterattacks and making plays off of their insane defensive efforts. So I think once they find that, they honestly could be one of the best teams, if not the best team in the league. And like you talked about with Calgary, like Calgary's kind of been the silent horse. They haven't really like talked much, or it's like you haven't really seen them that much. But man, they're coming out here and they're beating some of these teams that arguably, you can make an argument for Revolt being top tier as well. I
Mm-hmm.
just think that loss, that reverse sweep loss from the Blaze, I think really is what like put me to put them in mid tier. But I mean, who knows? They could prove me wrong. Like that game against the Vipers was very telling, which is why I think they're at the top of mid tier, but they're not quite up there yet. I'd like to see them play one of my top tier teams before I get a better idea for them.
All
And in
right.
terms of bottom tier, yeah, and in terms of bottom tier, like we just haven't seen that much from these teams. Like besides, like the Thrashers did pick up a win, but the Halos and the Thunder need to find, or the Sharks, sorry, they need to find something soon because I think this game between them this week is going to be a huge indicator of what their, yeah, the Halos and the Sharks game. I think that's going to be a huge game going forward throughout the rest of the season.
All right, and that's gonna move us on to our Q&A, and I think our first question comes in here from Rebel Desperado. Also, I think he changed his name to ZTW Rebel, player for the Toronto Ice, and he asks, "Who are the breakout performers of weeks 1 and 2?" I'll take that as the breakout performers in teams. So I'll go over my picks for breakout performances. And as I've mentioned before, going into the preseason, I thought Boston Revolt was not going to be a very high tier team. I had them near the bottom, if anything. But as I've gone on over before, them keeping such a close game with the Calgary Blaze, and then them absolutely kind of popping off against the Vipers was very quite telling to me. And I also want to look at the Dallas Deadeyes. They had a really, really insanely close game against the Toronto Ice, despite it being a 3-0. If you look at the match score, I think every game was, 1 goal margin.
It's
I think,
pretty much a 1 or 2 goal game, yeah.
yeah. Toronto Ice really just pulled it out at the end, from what I heard. And they also kind of disposed of LA fairly quickly in their game, in their game week 2. It was really, really telling. I think that game wasn't even close. So yeah, I think Dallas were big breakout performers, and I also think Boston was really good. Were really big.
Yeah, for me, I think it would have to be the Blaze, like especially in that game 1 reverse sweep, man. Zebra Strike, like looking at his stats here, he has one of the highest MVPR ratings, like in the league right now, and he absolutely, like, just looking at his stats, he popped off. He had a 52% shooting percentage in that series. That's like insane.
Wait,
That's
if I'm
almost
not wrong, he's top goal scorer in the league, isn't he?
yeah, I think he's actually one of the top goal scorers in the league, and with a 52% shooting percentage, that's just
That's
absolutely
insane.
insane. It's, even for a series, to just put on a clinic like that was insane. Obviously, like, I think a lot of people had the Orcas pretty high going into the season, and they pretty much kept that reputation. But I think I have to agree with you with the Dallas Deadeyes. Like, they seem like they're a very hot or cold team, and they really can perform depending on the day. And like you said, the ice game, it was a 3-0, but I don't think that scoreline tells the whole tale of that series. Um, but yeah, I'd have to agree with you. Also, the Hunters were really, really surprising. Kind of like mentioning the points that I talked about earlier. This team's defense is absolutely insane. We saw against the Orcas, arguably one of the best offenses in the league right now, and they took a game off of them, and it was pretty close up until that match 4. So definitely a breakout team for me.
Yeah, watching that first game, Minnesota versus Seattle, I thought the Hunters were gonna take it, like, for sure. It was really impressive. All right, and our final question of the week comes in from Solid Space, and he asked, "Who do you think is the most underrated team after the games on Friday and Saturday?" My pick for most underrated team, honestly, I think it has to be the New York Thunder. Although they haven't won a single map yet, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, they lost 3-0 to Aces, and they lost 3-0 to Ice. Although they haven't won a map yet, I really have been impressed with how they've played. I really like their players. I think Akkad has insane pop-off potential. I really like Thumb Thief. I think Thumb Thief is by far the best player on the team. And I think if the Thunder gets their rotations together, because I think their main problem is just like double and triple commits, and like counterattacks have been killer for them. I think if they get that sorted out, they can really establish themselves in like a high mid-tier, I think, honestly. So I think that is my underrated team, the New York Thunder. Keep an eye out on them.
Yeah, definitely for me, this might seem surprising for some people, but I think you definitely should, going forward, definitely watch out for the Vipers, because I'm not being biased or anything. Like, I legitimately think they are going to be a good team going forward. I think last week, sorry, this match against the Revolt was kind of a wake-up call for them, because I don't know exactly what happened. They look kind of lost. Especially like later in the series. Like, I think after they lost that 1-goal game in game 2, their mental, I think they just got boomed in their mental. But going forward, like, they play the Ice and they play the Deadeyes, so I think this is going to be a really telling week for the Vipers. But I would not be surprised if they go 2-0 this weekend. So definitely, I think that's like one of the top teams to look out for this weekend.
Okay, and I think that's gonna wrap it up for this week of MPC Overtime. You got any closing remarks, Cyber?
Yeah, so be sure, if you're listening to this and you're not in our Discord yet, like, what are you doing? Please join our Discord. We'd love to have you.
It'll be in the description.
It'll be in the description of the video, as Octo has graciously put in. Keep asking questions in the Mannfield Overtime channel. I know that these past couple weeks have been a little weird, because we thought we were going to get an overtime last week, and then we couldn't because schedules didn't line up and everything like that. So I know that's a little bit frustrating or a little bit annoying, but we are working on it. So please trust us in that regard. Also, I know this wasn't included in the Q&A, but I know someone had brought up the idea of like MVP interviews. So we've actually thought about it, and we think it might be a decent incentive to get onto MPC Overtime. So look out for that. We might add that as a little incentive if you get an MVP of the week, maybe. We can look more into that.
Yeah, we are
as we go on. It. Yeah, we are strongly considering it going forward into the season. And besides that, just be sure to watch the stream on Friday, as we have some games that'll be streamed, and on Sunday. So we hope that this new schedule works out for everyone, and I wish everyone best of luck this weekend.
Yeah, all the stuff that Viper mentioned, the stream, the Discord, hell, like everything's gonna be linked down in the description below. But just to close off this episode, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope to see you guys in the next episode, and I think that'll wrap it up for this week.